You may have heard someone ask, "What led you to believe that?" That's an invitation to explore the evidence behind your claim. But here's the thing, while evidence is crucial for evaluating claims, not all claims require the same kind of evidence. Using the wrong kind of evidence can lead you to reject a perfectly reasonable conclusion, or accept one you really shouldn't. So in this episode, let's explore how to match the right kind of evidence to the right kind of claim. Every claim we hear is making a certain kind of statement about reality. And before we can evaluate it, we need to ask, what kind of truth is this? Some claims are scientific, like smoking causes cancer. Others are historical, like Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon. Some are moral, like it's wrong to torture innocent people. Some are mathematical, like 2 + 2 = 4. And some are metaphysical, like you have a soul or God exists. Each of those claims points to something real, but we don't evaluate them all in the same way. Well, why not? Because each kind of claim asks a different kind of question. And over time, we've developed different tools to handle each one. Scientific claims deal with the physical world, things we can observe, measure, and test. So scientific evidence needs to be empirical. That means experiments, measurements, controlled observations, peer-reviewed studies, reproducible results. If I claim a new drug lowers blood pressure, you don't want to hear a story about how my cousin felt better. You want a clinical trial with a placebo group and statistical analysis. That's scientific evidence for a scientific claim. But here's the mistake people often make. They start expecting lab results for everything, even for things that can't be tested in a lab. Now let's talk about historical claims. For example, George Washington crossed the Delaware. You can't test that in a lab. There's no time machine we can use. So what kind of evidence do we rely on? We look at eyewitness accounts, letters and documents, multiple independent sources, archaeological findings, and consistency with known facts. That's historical evidence. And when it's strong, it's rational to trust it. You don't reject a historical claim just because it wasn't peer-reviewed. You evaluate it by historical standards, things like coherence, credibility, and context. Now, what about moral claims, or claims based in logic and reason? You can't weigh morality on a scale. You won't find justice under a microscope, and there's no blood test for whether lying is wrong. These are philosophical or moral truths, and the right kind of evidence for them is different. We use logical reasoning. We look for ethical consistency. We draw from experience, reflection, long-standing wisdom, and thought experiments. We pay attention to moral intuitions, especially the ones that seem universal. If I say murder is wrong, you don't need a double-blind study. You need a moral framework that makes sense of that conviction. And when someone says morality is just subjective, we don't hand them a lab coat. We hand them a sound argument. And then there are metaphysical claims. These deal with the deepest questions about reality. Why is there something rather than nothing? Do we have free will? Is there a soul? Does God exist? You can't put a soul under a microscope. You can't isolate God in a petri dish. And that doesn't mean there's no evidence. It just means the evidence looks different. We draw from logical inference, philosophical reflection, the reality of consciousness, the fine-tuning of the universe, the existence of moral truths, and yes, carefully interpreted personal experience. But most of all, we use inference to the best explanation. No one data point settles it, but when you step back and look at the big picture, you ask, what worldview makes the most sense of everything we know? That's how metaphysical claims are evaluated. We'll dive deeper into that in the next episode. Now let's talk about anecdotes. People use personal stories as evidence for everything. My neighbor took this supplement and felt great. Or I saw a YouTube video saying the moon landing was fake. My experience tells me God wouldn't do that. Now, anecdotes aren't always meaningless. Sometimes they point us to a deeper truth, but on their own, they're not enough to justify belief, especially when more rigorous forms of evidence are available. Anecdotes just sort of bypass analysis. They're emotional, memorable, and persuasive, but they're often misleading. And here's the hard truth. Once someone accepts a belief, even if it's based on weak evidence or faulty reasoning, it can be incredibly hard to change their mind. Why? Because belief isn't just intellectual, it becomes emotional. It gets woven into our identity. To change a belief often feels like tearing out a part of yourself. We talked about this in earlier episodes. Some people choose comfort over truth. They'd rather feel right than be right. But in this series, it is for people who want the truth, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it means rethinking something they've believed for years. If you demand scientific evidence for a metaphysical claim, you might conclude there's no external world that exists independent of your mind. If you demand laboratory proof for a moral claim, you might say that right and wrong aren't even real just because they can't be seen through a microscope. And if you insist that something had to be directly observed to be known, you'll miss out on entire fields of knowledge like cosmology and even ancient history. That's like using a thermometer to measure the speed of a car. It's the wrong tool. It's the wrong category. When we use the wrong kind of evidence, we don't just miss the truth. We might end up denying it altogether. That's why it's so important to match the evidence to the claim. So how do you match evidence to a claim? Start by asking, what kind of claim is this? Then use the tools that kind of truth requires. Scientific claims need data and experiments. Historical claims need records and reliable sources. Moral and metaphysical claims require reflection, reasoning, and sometimes a much wider lens. In our next episode, we'll explore that last category, metaphysical claims. These are the big questions about God, consciousness, free will, and the soul. They need a special kind of reasoning, and we'll look at how a cumulative case approach can help us find clarity. So, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep asking good questions.